All right, let's dive into one of the most famous, most documented, and honestly, one of the most chilling paranormal cases of all time, the Enfield Poltergeist. This is the story of a family in their London home, absolutely terrorized by something they couldn't explain. But the question that has haunted this case for decades is, was it a real haunting? Or was it just a really, really convincing prank?
And this story gets weird right from the very start. Because when the family finally called the police for help, the cops didn't find a break-in or anything they could explain away. In fact, one of the constables who showed up, WPC Carolyn Heaps, went on record saying she saw a chair slide across the floor all by itself, and that she had absolutely no explanation for it. I mean, when the police are baffled, you know something strange is going on.
So let's set the scene. We're in Enfield, North London. The year is 1977. We're inside the home of the Hodgson family. A single mom, Peggy, just trying to raise her 4 kids, and their lives are about to be turned completely upside down.
Look at how fast this all happened. It starts with something small. 11-year-old Janet tells her mom her brother's bed is wobbling. You know, something you might just dismiss. But by the very next night, they're hearing shuffling sounds, and then Peggy Hodgson watches this heavy chest of drawers just slide across the room. She tries to push it back and it won't budge. That's when they ran out of the house and called the police.
Okay, so the police can't really do anything. This is the point where the story goes from being a local disturbance to a full-blown paranormal investigation that the whole world would soon be watching.
2 investigators from the Society for Psychical Research, Maurice Grosse and Lyon Playfair, show up. And they don't just pop in for a visit, they stick around for 14 months. And in that time, they logged a staggering 2,000 separate incidents. We're talking everything from knocking sounds to objects flying through the air, all witnessed by over 30 different people.
And out of all those thousands of events, this picture is probably the one you've seen. It's the most famous piece of evidence to come out of the entire case. It was taken by a newspaper photographer, and it appears to show young Janet Hodgson being thrown across her bedroom, caught midair by some kind of unseen force.
But this is where the debate gets really intense. You have eyewitnesses who were totally convinced. A woman across the street swore she saw Janet floating and spinning horizontally in the window. But the skeptics have a pretty simple explanation. They say, look, this could just be an athletic kid jumping off her bed, and the camera just caught her at the right second. And that ambiguity is what this whole case is about.
But the photos are only half the story. The audio recordings from inside that house are, well, there's something else entirely. Because pretty soon after all this started, a strange, deep voice started speaking through Janet.
This is what they recorded. A gruff, raspy voice that sounded nothing like an 11-year-old girl. It claimed to be a man named Bill Wilkins, and it was describing, in detail, how he died. This voice would speak for hours on end, which you'd think would absolutely shred a young girl's throat.
So how could she even make that sound? Well, analysis of the tapes suggested she wasn't using her normal vocal cords. She was using something called her false vocal folds. It's another part of the larynx. Now, if you or I tried to talk like that for even a few minutes, we'd have a sore throat for days. Janet, somehow, could do it for hours with no problem.
And then came the bombshell. A man named Terry Wilkins got in touch with the investigators. He confirmed that his father, Bill, had lived in that house. And not only that, he had died of a brain hemorrhage while sitting in his armchair in the corner of the living room, exactly what the voice coming out of Janet had claimed.
So that's it, right? Case closed. An actual haunting, confirmed. Well, not so fast, because as powerful as all that evidence is, there is a whole other side to this story that says this was all just one big elaborate prank. And the biggest piece of evidence for the hoax theory? It comes from Janet herself. A few years later, in an interview, she straight up admitted that, yeah, she and her sister faked some of it. She said they only did it once or twice to see if the investigators would catch them, and claimed they always did.
And that admission wasn't a one-off thing. There were other red flags. Other investigators caught the girls trying to bend spoons. It was also pretty suspicious that whenever the Bill Wilkins voice started speaking, nobody was allowed in the room with Janet. At one point, they even left a tape recorder running, and it caught the girls plotting how to trick the investigators.
But Janet's story wasn't quite that simple. Years later, she clarified her statement, and that just made things even more confusing. She later claimed that only about 2% of everything that happened was faked. She said that sometimes they felt bad when investigators would visit and nothing supernatural was happening, so they'd, make something happen themselves. But this raises the million-dollar question. If you admit to faking even a little bit of it, how can anyone believe the rest? It just casts doubt on everything.
So you've got this mountain of really bizarre evidence on one side and admissions of trickery on the other. Why are we still so fascinated by this case? Well, it's because for every single piece of evidence that screams hoax, there's a counterpoint that's just incredibly difficult to explain away.
I mean, let's just break it down. On the "it was a genuine haunting" side, you have more than 30 independent witnesses, including police. You have the Bill Wilkins voice being confirmed, and you have things like an old, heavy fireplace being ripped from the wall, something the kids couldn't have done. But then, on the "it was a hoax" side, you have Janet's own admission, the girls getting caught, and the fact that a lot of other paranormal researchers were really skeptical of the whole thing. And the reason this debate is still going so strong is because of the sheer volume of documentation. This isn't just a story passed down through the years. There are hundreds of hours of audio recordings. There are photos. There are detailed witness statements. It really set a new bar for how these things were investigated, and that's why we can still pick it apart today.
And just when you think you might have it figured out, there's one last twist to this story. After the Hodgson family finally moved out, a new family moved in. They only lasted 2 months. The mother claimed that they always felt like they were being watched, that they would hear voices, and that her son woke up one night screaming because he saw a strange man in his room. They were gone the next day.
So, where does that leave us? Was this a terrified family truly haunted by some unseen entity, with evidence backed up by police and dozens of witnesses? Or was it one of the most elaborate, most successful childhood pranks in history, orchestrated by a couple of very clever girls? What really happened on Green Street? That is the question that keeps the Enfield Poltergeist alive.